join me on this hot summer's day, Christmas Eve as a matter of fact, in an R34 Nissan Skyline. Now this is my personal R34 Skyline, and there's a lot of people who think that all Skylines are extremely fast, great cars. This one is a 4-speed automatic non-turbo. That is to do with the fact that I am not on my full license and cannot actually drive a turbo as of yet. But people still give this car more credit than what it should actually deserve. Not to say that this is a bad car, but I think it needs to be put in some sort of perspective. So today, I'm going to be taking you, the viewers, through the pros and cons of owning an R34 Nissan Skyline. My personal favourite thing about this Skyline is the noise that it makes. It may not be the fastest Skyline in the world, but the noise is absolutely incredible. Is half the fun of this car. Again, it's not the fastest Skyline in the world, but when you put the foot down and make that kind of noise, I guarantee you will have a smile on your face. Something this Skyline does do just as well as other Skylines is handle really well around the corners. Again, not a fast car, but the handling is brilliant. It's really quite hard to get the tail end of this out, and it's really quite hard to stuff up any sort of slide once you're in one. It's quite forgiving, it's quite easy to correct if you are oversteering, and for a stock car it's quite low to the ground. It has a very low center of gravity, which means it doesn't feel wishy-washy around corners. It feels quite stiff and rigid. Also, part of that is due to the fact that this comes stock with a strut bar in the bonnet. I believe one of the things that makes the Skyline such an attractive car, especially to the younger generation, is the extensive aftermarket selection. This can be both performance mods and mods that, well, just add weight to the car and supposedly make it look better. Because of the large range of aftermarket parts, it's very easy to express yourself and really make your Skyline your own. This can mean, however, if you're in the market for a Skyline, that you may have some trouble finding a clean example, so you'd probably be better off importing one directly from Japan by itself. Now, one thing that doesn't get enough credit in the Skyline is the quality of the stock speakers in this car. I've driven many cheap cars. Now, this wasn't an expensive car for me to buy, but cars around the same price that I paid for this tend to really be lacking in the speakers department. The quality in this is actually quite great. Now, there's no way that the quality of my camera is going to be able to pick up the quality of the speakers, so you're just going to have to trust me on this one. But the speakers are quite crisp, clean, and you can really, it's got quite good bass as well. So take it or leave it. Again, the Skyline isn't really known for its quality sound systems, but it is just one thing that adds to the pleasure of driving this car. Probably the best thing for me about owning a Skyline is just the fact that I own a Skyline, and an R34 at that. It's a very iconic and very cool car. Even the 4 doors are quite iconic and cool. And I'm going to be completely honest, when I was in the market for a sports car, I wasn't a huge fan of the Skyline. The only reason I bought this particular Skyline is because it had 26,000 kilometers on the clock when I saw it, and I wasn't going to be an idiot. I had the money right there, and who isn't going to buy a Skyline with that low kilometers? It wasn't until I actually started driving the Skyline that I fell in love with it, and I realized what all the fuss was about. It tends to be a car that gets talked about a lot, especially by kids who don't have their license yet. But I can understand why. This is genuinely a pleasure to drive. It's, you know, it's quick enough. It's not the, especially this is not the fastest Skyline in the world, but it's quick enough. It handles brilliantly, and it turns heads. And for me, that's important because I've said it in previous videos. I'll say it again. I love attention, and this gets a lot of positive attention. You'll have people pull up at the red light next to you, wind down their windows and just stick their thumbs up, say, mate, that is such a cool car, you know, or give it a rev or something like that. And I love that, you know, I love that I have a car that's not boring. Now I'm going to move on to my least favorite parts of these types of videos, and that is the cons. And actually I had a bit of a hard time coming up with a proper cons list for this car, but the biggest con about the Skyline in general is the fact that if you are in the market for one, you are going to have a hard time finding a clean stock example. And we know that the cars that have been done up to the extent where they have ugly body kits, ridiculously big and chrome mags and stuff like that, tend to be really cheap, but also tend to be really ugly as well. So again, I would recommend that if you are in the market for a Skyline, actually go ahead, go through an import broker and import one yourself directly from Japan, rather than sourcing one from your local suburbs. There's plenty of import brokers in South Australia and across the rest of Australia. I actually went through an import broker based in Victoria to get this car, and they made the buying experience super enjoyable, super fun. It was actually a real pleasure buying from an import broker, which is not something, you know, you really associate with buying a new car. Sometimes it's stressful, and sometimes, you know, people hate the whole negotiating the price and such like that. But import brokers are different to your regular car dealers. You're using your own money to buy a car internationally and then paying the broker's fee, so it's quite different. So I would recommend that if you are in the market for a Skyline, to actually go through an import broker. Now this next point is actually a genuine con. This is an automatic. Look, I'm not dissing automatics, they're great for city driving, but this automatic is only a 4-speed, and it really does feel like, especially when you're in the sports automatic mode on the track, that it is missing a gear. It really should have at least 5 gears. The gears, they just take too long to rev up and change into the next gear. It's really lacking a gear, especially between second and third. Second and third are really good. They're really good for getting the power down, but as soon as you go into fourth, you just lose all of that sweet spot. So that is one aspect of this car that I would change if I could. I really wish that there was a 5-speed automatic version of this car. I also wish that I drove a manual, but hey. So unfortunately that is probably one of the cons of driving at least an automatic Skyline. There is some saving grace, at least you do have control of the gears with the sports automatic, but when you've only got control of, you know, a car with 4 gears, there's not a lot you can do with 4 gears. Another really big con about Skylines is that they are targeted both by police and thieves, actually more so by thieves than police. The cops have been really good since I've owned this car. I've only been pulled over once, and you know, he tipped his hat off to me, said that it was a pretty clean example. So again, it does get some attention from the police, but you'll find that it does unfortunately get more attention from thieves. Just in the last year, I can't count on one hand how many Skylines of all different generations have been stolen and then wrecked. Even 2 or 3 friends that I know personally have had their Skyline stolen and gone, you know, hundreds of kilometers away from where they've been taken from, just to be landed in a ditch. And it's quite sad because they're great cars and people put a lot of effort into maintaining them and keeping them clean. You know, you don't generally own a Skyline if you're not a cars person, so you do run that risk if you own a Skyline. I definitely wouldn't be parking it on the street. I wouldn't even be parking it in your own driveway. I would be recommending that if you can, be parking this in some secure parking, in a garage, under a carport, behind a gate, because the sad reality is that thieves love the Skyline. Now, one of the cons for me, which I didn't realise until I actually took this car out on the track, was the lack of acceleration that this car has, this particular 4-speed automatic has, from 150 kilometers an hour onwards. The acceleration is pretty good, especially when you're on the road, when you're going from 0 to 60, 0 to 80, 0 to 100, 0 to 110, I don't care. As soon as you hit 150, all of that acceleration just seems to disappear, and it takes forever to get from 150 to 170, 150 to 180, and I've not been able to get this car faster than 180 down the main straight of South Australia's biggest racetrack. And even if I had, I wouldn't know how fast I was going, because the speedo on this car only goes to 180. Again, this isn't something that's going to affect your enjoyment of your day-to-day driving with this car. But if you intend to track your Skyline, you're going to have to look at least getting a turbo Skyline and a manual to be able to keep that consistent acceleration going down the straights. Before I owned my Nissan Skyline, my first car was a Nissan Cube. Viewers that have seen my videos before will know that. And that car was always quite high off the ground, so I never had to worry about something that this car does all the time, and that is scraping up every single driveway that you go up. This car is a lot lower than your average car on the roads, and unfortunately, if you've got, you know, a couple of heavy people in the front and you're weighing the front down, you do scrape quite a lot. Now, I'm not a patient driver, so I don't go up driveways slowly. I tend to go up pretty quick, and most of the time, 95% of the time, I'll end up scraping the front bumper. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of damage on the front of this particular bumper, keeping in mind that that bumper was completely clean and in good condition when I bought this car just over a year ago. Look, if you're a safe driver and a cautious and a careful driver, and you don't have a driveway which is super steep, you're going to be okay, because this is still high enough off the ground that it misses anything dangerous. But you do need to keep in mind that when you're driving this car, that it is a lot lower to the ground than, well, a 4x4 or even something like a Toyota Camry or something of that nature. Honestly, I'm super lucky to own a Skyline. I bought this car when I was just 18 years old, and this was a low kilometer example. This had 25,000 kilometers when I first bought this car. It's now got about 35,000 kilometers on it. I'm super lucky to, at this young age, be able to own such a clean example of one of Japan's most iconic cars. And no amount of cons in the world is going to ever take that joy away from me. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe and click the bell to get notifications from when I upload. If you guys like these types of videos, I can keep on doing them. I've got plenty of people who've already messaged me and asked for me to do a pros and cons video on their car. So stay tuned, there's definitely more footage to come. Anyway, from me, I wish you all a Merry Christmas, because it is Christmas Eve as I'm recording this. I wish you a safe and happy 2019, and we will be seeing you in the new year. Peace out.